Hi, I'm Ben Osterhouse. I'm a composer, cellist, and sample library developer, and in this video I'll be introducing the Pathfinder Violin. As a string player, I'm always thinking about how to connect notes as expressively as possible. And as a composer, I love finding interesting melodic lines through chord changes. The Pathfinder Violin was invented as a way to generate string arrangements based off of chords you play into it, and for these string arrangements to feature the kinds of expressive note changes that I personally like to do as a player. To make this happen, I carefully recorded lots of two-note phrases. I created an interface which would intelligently stitch these phrases together, and this interface pulls from a set of about 4,500 individually recorded samples. Here's what it sounds like. It's fun how you can play any chord and it'll adapt. It's very flexible. It's also fun how the note changes glue things together. I could get the same notes from this preset by playing two separate chords, maybe something like this. But yeah, you can hear it's not quite the same. So let's look at how the arrangements are made. I'm going to open up the preset browser by clicking here. Go to the user presets category and choose a blank one. And let's say I played a 5-note chord. You can see the labels on the side show the notes I'm playing. C, D, E, F, G. Next, I'm going to open up the edit view by clicking here. And so to get sound, I have to drag a path from the paths panel to the grid. This path I just put here goes from the first row to the second row. So if I play the same chord again, I should get a C to a D. If I duplicate this path, let's put it here. Now this one will go from E to F. Hey, parallel thirds. So these types of paths are the slanted kind, and that means that they're more slidey. If you select both paths and choose both paths on the grid, and then in the paths panel you choose a different one here, you can hear these are less slidey, more clean. You can also change the properties of selected paths using these two panels on the right. If you change speed, it'll choose samples that were recorded at a slower BPM. Here's what that sounds like. A bit more lugubrious. If you turn on double, every path will play back two samples rendered together, so it'll sound fuller. The movement plus and minus buttons control how paths move through the notes of the chord you're playing. It opens up a lot of neat possibilities for voice leading. So for example, instead of just having these voices move in parallel, what we could do is maybe have this go down there and this go up like this, and then why don't we just duplicate this and it'll sound like this. Yeah, it's kind of cool how they like diverge. The last two things here are the volume and pan sliders. The pan slider is a nice way to widen the stereo image. So just pan two of them side to side, and then we'll leave this one in the middle. Yeah, it's kind of nice to have a wide stereo image. The volume, here's an interesting use case for that. Let's say you've got a moving line on top, but then you've got a bunch of lines that stay the same down here. And you might want to bring out that moving line, so you could pull down the volume on the sustains. Yeah, so that's kind of handy. Next, let's talk about the trim panel, or the fade and trim panel. So this panel was originally designed so that you could splice paths together. Let me show that. Let's say we took this path and we trimmed off its end, maybe up till there, and then faded it out a bit. And then let's say we took this path and we trimmed off its start, faded it in a little bit. And then if we were to stick it here, now they would, well, take a listen. Yeah, now they fit together seamlessly. And what's cool about this is that, you know, this is going to work for any 5-note chord that you play. So that's kind of fun. The trim panel is also useful for other effects. For example, I think it's kind of interesting how the feathers preset works. It's just a ton of paths that are all crammed together, and they've been trimmed and faded out randomly, so it makes this interesting texture. So far, I've only been playing 5-note chords. Watch what happens when I add a note and play a 6-note chord. Okay, so it automatically switched up to the 6-note tab, and in this tab it's totally blank. So why is that? Well, these paths are telling it what to do with each key that you're playing of the 5-note chords. If you play a 6-note chord, what is Pathfinder supposed to do with that 6th note? Well, you can tell it what to do in the 6-note chord tab. So yeah, it's kind of a lot of empty space to fill in here, but these edit functions down here can be a lot of help. Let's take a look at the Add button. If you click somewhere and then you click Add, it'll add a path, and that path will just inherit the properties of whatever the last thing you selected was. So if I click on this one and then click Add, it added a copy of this, and etc. The Remove button is pretty self-explanatory. Just removes selected paths. Copy and paste are very useful. Let's say you wanted to elaborate on the 5-note chord tab. Just copy, paste, and maybe, I don't know, copy like that. And now a 6-note chord will sound like this. The Select All button is pretty self-explanatory as well. Just selects everything. The Tools menu, there's some interesting macros in here because remember the feathers patch. If you look at the panning down here as I select different ones, you can see that they're all panned differently. And this was done by selecting everything and then randomizing the panning 100%. The Preview button. This is kind of an interesting way to just hear little bits of what you're working on without having to play anything or listen to the rest of the preset. So if you turn Preview on and then you press and hold on a path, then you get to hear it. And if you press and hold on multiple paths, it'll play both of them. The flip function is kind of interesting because let's say you've made something that you really like, you could just copy it, flip it, and now you've got a fresh new variation. Flip each works similarly, except it's the equivalent of if you went like this and just went through each one and flipped each one individually. So this is a lot of stuff in here to deal with, and if you just want to get some nice sounds, there's plenty of presets to choose from. So there's categories here, and in each category you can see there's plenty of presets, and each preset, if you look at all of the tabs along here, it's been determined how everything should work. Yeah, so a lot of the work that I'm showing here with these paths and editing and stuff like that, that's already been done. So in the Pathfinder Violin, in the Library tab, you'll see this presets folder. This is something new from the cello. Let's say I drag in the sustains. Now, in each of the tabs up top here, there's a different variation of sustain. And I didn't mention this before, but the tabs at the top, you can get to them by key switching. And you could even be holding a chord and go to a different tab, like mid chord. The sustains NKI isn't a great example for this. I'm going to do it with this one. Okay. Yeah, so that's an interesting way to work. Just play a chord and then change what pattern gets used for that chord. So to wrap it up, I just want to go over these controls on the front. The release and reverb are pretty self-explanatory. The tempo sync I wanted to talk about a bit though. Let's say you've started a project and it's at 60 BPM and you're really liking how it's going, and so you think, I wonder what if I added Pathfinder Violin to this? But because it's at 60 BPM, it sounds like this. It's very, very time stretched. So if you change your project tempo to 120, then that's going to mess up the rest of the project. So the way around this is to just use the tempo sync, turn it to 2 times speed, and now at 60 BPM, we just get the samples as they were recorded. Well, that brings us to the end of the video. I'm excited to see what you do with the Pathfinder Violin, and thanks for watching.